If you are new or visiting, my name is Matt. I get the joy of being the priest in this beautiful community. At Unlimited, we want to do two things really beautifully. We want to be this center in the middle of the city where people come and they find out who Jesus is. The church is not a building. This is a beautiful building, but it is a group of people gathered, doing their best to love God, to become more like Jesus, and to do the things that he did. And so we want to be that beautiful community in the middle of the city, introducing people to Jesus, showing them who he really is. And then secondly, to see miracle after miracle where we find ourselves. And so I want to dive in. This is not a normal talk today. We are not in our Mark series. I apologize for that. We are diving out of Mark and we're diving into Deuteronomy. And that may surprise you if you've been in church a little while to hear that we're diving into Deuteronomy for our vision. But all will be explained in just a moment. And so if you've got a Bible, if you've got a phone, would you just either Google or turn to Deuteronomy Chapter 6, and we're going to dive in just a moment. And so I pray that this is a message that you'll hear time and time and time again. I pray that elements of this talk you will have heard before. I pray that as you become a member of Unlimited, that this is something that sits deep within us. And so every 9 months or so, I'm going to dive into this talk again and again and again. And every month I dive into one aspect of our vision. And today I want to dive into our why behind our emerging generations. Like, why do we invest so much time, effort, and energy into the younger generations, into kids, youth, students, young adults? Like, what is it that drives us to kind of like push them to be one of the core elements of our mission? When I took on Unlimited, we were pigeonholed as a youth church. Someone that, I would meet people on the street and they'd say, oh, I'm running Unlimited. And they'd say, oh, that's the youth center. Oh, that's the youth church. Oh, aren't you the youth group? And I'd say, no, we are not a youth church. This is not a youth church. This is a multi-generational family on a mission to see our rising generations encounter Jesus. We are not a youth church. We are a missional family together. And so I think I've kind of solidified our vision to be this. If people say, what's Unlimited? I say this: Unlimited is a multi-generational family on a mission to help people come alive as they encounter Jesus, where we have a unique commissioning from the diocese to reach the rising generations. And so if someone says to you, hey, is Unlimited a youth church? The answer is no, it's a multi-generational family on a mission. And so I think, when I was interviewed for this role, I was asked about four things. The first thing was church. They said, will you faithfully take on the church? Will you do your best to love the church community? Will you do your best to help them, to nourish them, to love Jesus, and to become more like him? And that was an easy yes. Second thing was about community. And the church is not just a group of people that meet on Sunday morning who are nice people, although we are nice people, right? It goes wider than that, doesn't it? It spreads into the community. I'm going to talk about the coffee trailer a bit later, but I love the fact that we run the coffee trailer out in the city. I love the fact that we run Alpha in our home. I love the fact that we were out late, at 4 o'clock in the morning serving students rolling out of fever. I love the fact that we are in the community. We're not an insular organization. We are a community-driven organization focused on Christ, but in the community that welcomes all people in. Third thing was chaplaincy. And I love the role that we have, as I have often as chaplain. What I find amazing is the relationships that are building. In 4 weeks' time, I'm going to be preaching to, a couple of thousand young people in the cathedral. At the college carol service. And for the first year I did it, I said to them, hey, I'm going to talk about Jesus. It's going to be a bit different to what you're used to. Do you want to read through my script? And they were like, crack on, just get on with it. We had this opportunity to speak about Jesus where he isn't being proclaimed. I'm a chaplain to the Scouts, the regional chaplain to the Scouts. What does that mean? It means I spend some of my time in board meetings locally, but it also means I get to be the kind of director of spirituality. I get to show people who Jesus is, who turn up to Scouts and the Scouting movement. They're a Christian organisation in the city. We are chaplain to schools. we go into schools and what happened in the first few weeks of getting this job is I got a phone call from a local school and they said to me, hey, you're a priest, we're a Church of England school, can you come help us be more Christian, please? It's amazing the difference that we can make in local schools. And so we do chaplaincy, I think, really well. Fourth thing is culture. And this is a bit of a more of a vague one, but really, Unlimited Church is a centre of mission. And that mission isn't to stay in these four walls, but it's to expand out into the wider Church of England. But what they want us to do is to say, this is working, this is not. They want to throw ideas at us and us say, that's never going to work. And this would work if you did it like this. And we are called to be a culture-changing organisation for not just our church, but churches across Devon. Isn't that amazing? That's who we are. So we're founded on 4 pillars: church, community, chaplaincy, and culture. And we were founded in 2010. Sorry, this is a bit of a history lesson if you haven't been. It's important background. We were founded in 2010 by a guy called James Greer. He's now the Bishop of Plymouth. He's now Bishop James Greer. And he started Unlimited with just face-to-face evangelism on the Cathedral Green, 2010. And he kind of spiked enough interest in who Jesus was among young people that they started to form a church. And they met in the side room. And then that grew, and then they started hiring this space. And then the rest is history. We are a group of people out on a mission to serve with joy, to pray like mad, and to give ourselves to reach the missing generations, which we would now call the rising generations, those who are sub 25. Something that I'm really proud of is that we are known in the city. And through the coffee trailer, through chaplaincy, through some of the stuff that we're doing. I remember about 18 months ago, we were running something called Toasty Tuesday, or Tuesday Toasty Tuesday, I think it was, in this space. Where we'd get the panini machine out, and we would, make tea and make coffee and make paninis for the kids. And I remember going along the high street. It was a particularly quiet day, and I took Tom and we wandered down the high street, and I just said to these bunch of kids, I was like, hey, do you want to come for a toasty? And they were like, why would we come to your church for a toasty? This is weird. And I said, we run the coffee trailer in the park. Do you want? And they were like, we know you guys, we'll come for a toasty. And they came in and we had this conversation about faith and about life. I love the fact that we are known in this city. We're known across Devon and we make an impact. And what I love is that there are many different Unlimiteds. This Unlimited is a ski brand in Banff, California. They're checking things for my kids. I've got another Unlimited sticker for a skateboard place in America. But what makes us different from these? This is Unlimited. That's a ski brand. We've got Unlimited. That is a skateboard brand. But this is who we are. We are an Unlimited church. We are making a difference in our community. We're a community of faith that isn't just there to make entertainment, that isn't there to gather nice people, that isn't there just to sit and smile, isn't there to sing nice songs. We are here in this city to show people who Jesus is, to proclaim him anew, to be the people who will go to the people that no one else is going to. We want to get excited about who Jesus is. And I'm excited to take you on the journey. And we are going to dive into Deuteronomy on that note. Are you ready? Mia, can we welcome Mia, everybody? Mia, coming up and read. We're in Deuteronomy Chapter 6, and it goes something like this, coming into the middle.
Oh, thank you. Right. Deuteronomy Chapter 6, verses 1 to 9. These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be one on your hearts. Where am I? Thank you. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mia. Thank you, Mia. I asked Mia like 10 minutes ago, and so thank you, Mia. Okay, I want you to give you 1 minute just to reflect on what you've heard, and just 1 minute, say like one thing you love, maybe about what we've just said, something about the scriptures, and then I'm going to come back in just literally 1 minute's time. Is that okay? Coming in. The New Living Translation, the NLT, puts this last bit: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Repeat them again and again to your children. The Bible gives a clear mandate and precedent to keep a focus on our rising generations. Teaching them who Jesus is. Proclaiming who God is. Telling them about his love, teaching them his commands, showing them his heart for humanity, understanding the big why he created us. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, before anything else, with all of your energy and effort. Teach them who God is. Proclaim his love. Teach them to obey his commands. Show his heart for humanity. And repeat them again and again and again and again and again. Yeah, if you could slice unlimited in two, I pray this is not what would come out. That we wouldn't just be a nice, cool surf brand, wherever it may be. Or this skateboard brand is not what would come out. That we wouldn't just be like a semi kind of cool brand in the middle of the city, but we would be a community that does our best to love God with all of our heart. Does our best to proclaim Jesus again and again and to repeat that on loop. It's interesting, when I gave this talk, a very similar talk, a year ago, there were some stats where I said that only 4% of those who are 18 to 24 were in church right now. 4%. And if that number dropped by 0.3 to 3.7, they would be technically an unreached people group. What is beautiful is that the Bible Society has done some research over the last year, and what they have found is staggering, is that 4% of 18 to 24-year-olds went to church last year. It has jumped to 16%. Well, isn't that amazing? We've seen a 4 times return on young people coming back to church. Of the 25 to 34 age group, 4% were in church. 13% are now in church. The 35 to 44s, big up that group. There was 5 of us, and now there's 8% of us across the nation in church. Isn't that staggering what God is doing? People are coming in and they're realizing that consumerism isn't working. That you do you isn't working. What they're realizing is that just you live your best life isn't working. What they are realizing is that there is a man called Jesus who changes our lives. The God who is man and the man who is God, who comes and transforms our lives, is alive and at work. And this is what we are seeing. I vividly remember the day that I was thrown out of church. And if you've been here a little while, you will remember the story. It happened a few times actually, but the first time I was 13. And I remember sitting in my parents' living room with great shame as I won't tell you what I called him, but there was a bloke who came into my parents' front room and said, "Matt, you're too violent, you're too gobby, you smash up the church, and you're too much of a risk. We can't have you here anymore. I'm so sorry." And I got thrown out, and I remember the shame of my parents. I was actually quite relieved. I was like, yes, I don't have to go to church anymore. You know, I remember this guy thought he was like issuing a death sentence, and I was quite pleased about it. And eventually they realized that they needed me to play drums in the band, so I got welcomed back. And I had this relationship over about a 3-year period of being invited back because they needed me, and then I would smash something or break something or punch someone or be violent, and they would throw me out again. And I went through this loop of being invited and thrown out, invited and thrown out, and invited and thrown out. They'd say, "You're too much of a risk to be here, thanks so much." My youth work at the time was absolutely useless, but I had really, really great friends that kept me on the straight and narrow. I remember being in this group of friends that they were my church. They kept me in the faith in rocky times. And I remember having this really rocky relationship with church and just thinking it was totally irrelevant. And it wasn't a beautiful community like this. It was slightly different. And I remember I was 16, and gone through this cycle of being wanted and not wanted, and wanted and not wanted, and wanted and not wanted. And I went to this Christian camp to study for my GCSEs. It was over Easter, and it was in Woolacombe. Anyone been to Woolacombe Beach? Like one of the most beautiful places on earth. Yeah. If you haven't been, it's a 45-minute drive. Go up to Woolacombe. It's just. Is it 45-minute drive? Have I made that up? It's like an hour and a half. Yeah, okay, it's an hour and a half, but that's near 45 minutes. So go to. It's beautiful. And I remember the guy all week. The guys were like, "Hey, Matt, God hasn't given up on you. The church has, but God hasn't." And all week I'd be like, "Get out of my face." There was a phrase when I was a kid which was like, "Speak to the hand." Anyone remember that phrase? Yeah, okay, a few of us. And that was like the phrase of the week. I was like, "I'm not interested." And the last day we were there, we were going surfing, and I loved surfing. I've always loved the sea. Even though I'm a Londoner, I've always loved the sea. And I remember we were in the first minibus down to the beach, and they got a call, and they said, "Hey, the minibus is a bit delayed. We've got 10 minutes. Matt, do you want to talk about God?" And I was like, "Get out of my face." I was actually a bit ruder than that, but I remember saying, like, "Get out of my face." And the guy said, "I'll tell you what, Matt, we've got 10 minutes. Why don't you sit on the rocks before we go in the sea, and you can ask him, you ask God for yourself, like whether he's real." And I remember saying to this guy, I said to him, I'll pray to your imaginary God if it shuts you up. Like, if it shuts you up for 5 minutes, I'll sit on these rocks and I'll pray to your imaginary God. Thank you very much. And I remember sitting on the rocks, and I knew God was real in my heart. I knew God was real in my heart. And I sat there and I said, "God, like, I know you're real, but it seems so irrelevant. And actually, the things around me seem so much more exciting." I remember sitting on these rocks and said, God, like, if you really are real, like, come show yourself. And I just sensed this wave of love just rush over me. I sensed the Holy Spirit just move over me, and everything changed. My whole life was turned upside down. Everything was different. If you drill into my why I'm here in this role, why I love what we're doing as a church, why I'll give my life to it, those years play a critical factor that I want no one to have the same experience as that. I never want a single person to be thrown out of church because they don't fit, or they feel like they're not part of the crew, or they're too gobby or too dangerous, or don't quite fit the mold. I never want anyone to have the same experience as that. You compare that to my experience in a London church, a church called Holy Trinity Brompton. The guy who runs Alpha was my boss, where he said to me, "Matt, can you take on this Connect group?" And I took on this little hangout, and it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. I had an amazing team. I didn't do any of the work. I had people like Laura and some other friends that did all the work, and it grew to about 150 people in this little sweaty youth hut. And we would meet every Tuesday night, it was. And it grew and grew and grew to the point where he said to me, "Matt, you should become a vicar." I was like, "I am not becoming a vicar. That is not happening, Nicky." And he said, "No, I think God is calling you to become a vicar." And I said, "I am not becoming a vicar, but I respect you enough to go to the interviews." And I went to these interviews, and 3 years later, I was convinced he was right. That God was calling me to be someone who wouldn't just fit the mold, but would break the mold in order to encourage people who don't feel like they fit the mold back into a community where they can be loved and nourished by the Father. Loved and nourished by God, cared for beyond measure. This is who we are. We are a family who will go out of their way to love and love and love and care and care and care and show people who Jesus is. What's the grand narrative of the scriptures? It's the renewal of all things. Out of nothing, God creates, sets the world in motion in a beautiful space where humans can flourish. What's the story? Well, we ruin it, hey? Like, God creates Adam and Eve and says, "You can have anything in this garden, just not that one apple. That one tree, anything else." And where do we go as humanity? We grab the apple, we take a bite, and then we enter a world where there is brokenness, where God throws us out of paradise, not because of his choice, but because of our choice. And we don't live in a world where there's no more striving or no more death or no more loneliness or suffering. We now live in a world where we are spiritually sick, where we have a distinct lack of peace, where mental health is something that we struggle with, where we see that the world isn't how it should be. Yeah, that's not where God leaves us, is it? God does something. He sees that. His plan from the beginning was to rescue us from that. So he sends his son into the world to live and to breathe, to live the perfect life that we were called to live but could never live, and to die on a cross to pay our debt and our punishment so that we can be reunited with the Father again. And he can accept us back and see us through the lens of Jesus' perfect life. And what's the promise is that Jesus is coming back to judge the living and the dead, based not on good works or merit, based on faith. This is our story. This is who we are, and this is what we are called to tell again and again and again to our rising generations, to the people of God who they don't realize are the people of God yet, to the youth, students, kids in our city, to those young and old, rich and poor, those who have every kind of background, that there is a God who is for you and loves you and is rescuing you, and this is not it. Why would I spend so much time of this talk talking about this? Because our understanding of what Jesus is doing, has done and will do changes everything. Changes our approach to how we interact. Changes our ability to speak into the lives of people around us. And moves us to this unlimited rather than this unlimited. And so I want to break out here, and I've spoken for 22 minutes, and I was hoping this would be 10 minutes. And so I want to break out here, and I want to ask the question, what does it mean for the renewal, what does renewal look like in our wider community? And how can you actively serve the rising generations and pray for them? If you're not a Christian, what difference would if you're not a Christian, what difference would you hope faith would make in your life? Come on in. Who had a good conversation? Yeah? Had a good conversation? A few people? Yeah, great. Anyone want to feedback anything? No, okay, that's all right. That's all right. Let's dive into Deuteronomy. I think, what I love about this place is that we are a multi-generational family on a mission. It's fascinating what I think God is doing in this space. What is interesting is 34% of 18 to 24-year-olds who are non-church goers would go to church if invited by a friend. Isn't that amazing? And that's stats I've read out earlier. 34, over a third of people in our city, in the communities that we live and we breathe and we love, 34% of them would come to church who are 18 to 24 if invited by a friend. Staggering. This is so powerful when we look at youth culture. Thankfully in Exeter we live in the safest place on earth. I've said this before. I remember leaving my car key on the wall outside my house in front of my car. Left it there overnight, nothing. Came back, it was there the next morning. And it is ridiculous how safe the city is. But I don't think it's ever been harder to be a young person than in today's world. 2 years ago, you might have heard me say this a year ago. 2 years ago, Bernardo's did a report, and they said poverty, financial instability, and inequality are things that young people are having to navigate in today's world. It's interesting, isn't it? It's the Church Times. Did a report. Church Times is like the Church of England newspaper, and they said this: just 15% of young people in the UK are optimistic about the future. Just 15% of young people they surveyed in the UK were optimistic about the future. You compare this. I'd love to compare this to like the millennials and the boomers. Who had the world at their fingertips. This is so backwards. If young people knew the joy that God had for them, was going to bring them, despite us facing the harshest situations, how much would this change our beautiful city? If they knew how mad God was about them, that he would leave heaven to reconcile them to himself, or that his plan was to destroy evil and suffering and death and come back to renew the earth so that only his holy goodness would prevail. Imagine how that would change the landscape of the young people today. Or that we were created by a God who's so invested in our lives that he would become human being in order to bring us a perfect, ultimate peace. It would change everything. It would change everything. Deuteronomy 6, verses 5 to 9. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands. Repeat them again and again to your children. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. Some of you will know, a guy called Sean Hornsby. He used to work at Rediscover. I love Rediscover. And now works for YFC. And he said this. He said, the bad news is 92% of young people in this nation have a negative or an indifferent opinion of the church. The good news is that 36% of young people want someone to speak to them about faith. 36% of young people that they surveyed want someone to talk to them about faith. And 51% of young people would want to know more about Jesus when someone talks to them about him. Isn't that amazing? 50% of people who hear about Jesus want to know more about him. We have the ultimate offer that we can give people. Ultimate security, ultimate love, ultimate life, ultimate joy, ultimate peace. You contrast these stats with something like Revelation 21. Go back and read it tonight. Or Isaiah 11, where we hear about what God is going to do. The contrast is vast. Yet the world demands more and more and more and more. Yet Jesus' heart isn't to hustle, but to renew. And our culture becomes more and more draining and brutal. Yet Jesus is here gently declaring, this is not it. This was never meant to be the plan. I have something so much greater for you. Let's come back to our core vision. Unlimited is a multi-generational family on a mission to help people of all ages come alive as they find out who Jesus really is. Where we have a unique commissioning from the diocese to reach the rising generations as a family together. It's interesting, isn't it? What God is doing. In that report, I read some of the stats. It says this: the young people today that they sampled don't go to church anymore, but they have an above average levels of warmth to spirituality and the church and spiritual practice. Of that age group, 18 to 24-year-olds, they are most likely to pray regularly, with 40% praying they pray at least once a month. Half of them, 51, have engaged with a spiritual practice over the past 6 months. They are also the group that are most interested in learning more about the Bible, with 37% of them saying they are curious to discover more about it. And here are some headline stats. 31% of non-church goers said they would attend church if invited by a friend. 31%. Of all people that they surveyed would be interested. Imagine, just ponder that tomorrow. A third of everyone that you speak to tomorrow, that you speak to this week, would be interested in hearing about who Jesus is if you invited them. Over half of non-church goers, 56%, would be happy for a Christian friend to pray for them. Let's just ponder that a moment. When someone says to you about their mum or anxiety or struggles or doubts or fears or whatever it may be, 56, over half of the people that you come into contact with that share their burdens with you would be up for you praying with them on the spot there and then. Isn't that remarkable? 18% say they would be interested in learning more about the Bible. 22% of non-church goers say that they would read the Bible if recommended by a friend or a trusted person in their life. We have so much to offer younger generations in our city. They are a gift. They are not the future of the church. They are the church today. I really believe that the harvest has never been riper, and I'm talking about that next week. The harvest has never been riper. We've got a generation that is seeking truth that is not malleable, but is found in Jesus. A firm foundation to place their feet, who will never give up on them, never let them down. We have the answers to what they are crying out for. And so here's where I come into land 30 minutes and 30 seconds later. What do we do? What's our call? What's our vision? Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all your soul, all your strength. These commandments I give you today, let them be on your hearts. We're called to become more like Jesus. To love God with all of our strength, everything we've got, and to become more like Jesus. How did Jesus treat the younger disciples? Jesus called a bunch of teenagers to change the world, right? We know this. Matthew 17, they only paid tax for Jesus and Peter. Why? Because the rest of the disciples were under the tax threshold in terms of age. Not wealth, in terms of age. Matthew chapter 20, James and John's mum comes and asks Jesus for a favor. Why is she speaking? Because they're not old enough to speak for themselves. John is recorded preaching in the 90s AD. 90s AD. When was Jesus alive? Died in the 30s AD. Meaning that he would have been late 70s, maybe 80s at that point. He must have been a teenager when called by Jesus. And then there's the phrase rabbi. You get the phrase rabbi, rabbi, rabbi. That comes up all the time. Rabbi was used by the young and by the young adults, referring to a teacher that they were actively following. Jesus is clearly doing something beautiful with the rising generations. Jesus clearly empowers them, gifts them to lead. That's what I loved about Thursday night. It wasn't me leading the team, it was these guys leading the team in student mission. We talk a lot about loving God and becoming more like Jesus and doing the things that he did. And therefore, what are we going to do that looks and smells like Jesus? How are we going to be bold and brave and courageous in the way that we proclaim him and use the resources that we have at our fingertips to reach the next generations? Our vision at Unlimited, I think, is fairly simple. To be a multi-generational people, family, movement, who comes alive as we see people coming alive as they encounter Jesus, of all ages, backgrounds, but with a unique commissioning to reach those who are in the rising generations. Should we pray? Do you want to stand?